My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is October 19th, 2007, and I'm at the ConocoPhillips OSU Alumni Center interviewing Norma Crane. This interview is being conducted as part of O State Stories, an oral history project of the OSU Library. Thank you for joining us today, Mrs. Crane.
Thank you.
Let's begin by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you grew up.
I grew up in Hobart, Oklahoma, and I live there now. I lived in Wichita Falls, Texas for about 43 years, and then I retired from, I was public information officer for the city of Wichita Falls, and I retired from there and moved back home to Oklahoma to get away from the traffic and get away from all the noise and things like that.
And going back now to your OAMC years, can you tell me why you decided to attend Oklahoma A&M College?
Well, I have kind of a deep-seated background in Oklahoma State University. My great uncle and my great aunt were two of the first people to work with the county agents and the home demonstration agents, and when it was a land grant, it still is a land grant college, I guess, but when it was only a land grant college. And my great uncle was in charge of the southwestern part of Oklahoma, and my great aunt was the woman in charge for the northeastern part. There was a man and woman in each section of Oklahoma. This is way back when it first started. And so there was no question but that my allegiance was going to be to then Oklahoma A&M College. And when I started the school, I'll tell you this, from Hobart, we were definitely an OU town. And I was the only one that went to Oklahoma A&M. And at that time, everybody teased me unmercifully. And I had to endure all those horrible Aggie jokes and hated them and loved Oklahoma A&M.
Now, when you were at OAMC, what was your major? What did you study?
I majored in journalism. I had 3 minors. I had a minor in sociology, a minor in advertising, and a minor in political science. I had a teacher, an advisor, Professor Stratton, wonderful teacher. And he felt like every journalism major should have between 18 and 21 hours every semester. So and he wanted you to take classes in every school on the campus if you could. Well, all the journalism people did was go to school and work, then. And so I had so many hours I had to take that I ended up with 3 minors.
That's amazing. Were there many women in the journalism program?
Well, when I started to school, my freshman year, there were about 250 to 275 declared majors for journalism. There were probably 5 or 6 women in that group. And there were 2 of us that graduated, but the total graduating journalism majors only numbered 14. So a lot of them washed out, or quit and changed their majors. No, there were not very many women in journalism. In fact, when I started to work on the OCOLI, because I was one of the few women in journalism, they expected me to be a really loose woman, because I was in journalism. So, I don't know whether they were disappointed or it was, but it wasn't true.
What was it like working on the OCOLI those days? What was your beat?
Well, when I started working I had worked on a newspaper all through high school. I'd worked on a weekly newspaper, and I'd had a wonderful editor and publisher. They had really helped me. And so the one thing the publisher told me was when I got to school to go in and volunteer to work on the newspaper, not wait. At OU, you had to wait until your junior or senior year to work on the newspaper. So I started the school, and the second week I was in school here, I went to the OCOLI office and said, I want to volunteer to write some news stories. And they just looked at me and said, well, you have to go through freshman journalism first. And I said, but I think I know how to do it. I've been working on a newspaper for 3 years. Finally, I wore them down and they gave me a story to do. And so I did the story. And from then on, I got to work on the newspaper. That's how I got to work on it. Well, the first thing that I got was assistant society editor. You know, in those days, there was always society. And then society editor, and then I went on up to associate editor.
What was that first story about that they gave you?
I don't remember. It was some innocuous little club meeting somewhere that was not difficult at all.
What was your favorite story? Do you remember?
Oh, that's a good one. Margaret Truman, President Truman's daughter, came here to give a concert. These were in the days when she was singing and going around giving concerts. So she came to give a concert, and they had a press conference for her, and there were people from Oklahoma City and Tulsa, and all the different newspapers were here, and the news conference was in the Student Union building. So they sent me to cover the news conference. Well, she was a member of the same sorority that I was a member of, and so my sorority had said, please ask her for dinner. So when the press conference was over, I went up to her and said, Ms. Truman, we would like for you to come to dinner at the Pi Phi house tonight. And she said, well, I can't, but if you could sit down for just a few minutes, I'd just like to talk to you. So I sat down and talked to her for an hour. I mean, she talked about the people she was dating, you know, the one she was dating in particular, and how she got out of the house with all the Secret Service people there, all of this stuff that nobody was supposed to know, and it would have been but I was sworn to secrecy. I couldn't tell anything. Now, can you believe today that anybody would have sworn? I mean, kept
sure.
that. Why? They would have put it on the news as fast as they could, but I didn't write it. I didn't write anything about it because I had promised her I wouldn't. But I got back to the old Collie office, and I'd been gone for like 2.5 hours, and they said, where have you been? And I said, talking to Margaret Truman. And that was one of the most interesting stories I ever did. She was a lovely person, and she had the prettiest blonde hair I've ever seen in my life.
Did she have Secret Service agents with her?
Not in the room. Now, I don't know whether they were here or not. I don't think they were here. Now, they may have been and just been good enough that we didn't see them.
That's interesting. Now, in your classes, where did you take the majority of your classes? What buildings?
Well, I started school in 1949, and there were lots of people on the campus then because they had come back from the war, and they were out going to school on the GI Bill. We didn't have enough classrooms. We had so many people here on the campus, so many more than normal. So they had barracks set up and Quonset huts, and we went to classes in Quonset huts and barracks. My journalism classes were in barracks. And the library, which is, you know, this gorgeous library over here, opened my senior year. For the 3 years before then, all the library books were scattered all over the campus in like 15 to 17 different libraries. So if you had a class in journalism and you had to do some research on something, they would say go to library number 10 and library number 14 to find out this information. So, you know, it was terrible. That was awful. I was so glad to see that library open.
Was there one central place that told you where to go to find the book you needed?
Usually, well, there was a place that gave you information, but usually it was your teachers.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
In the Quonset huts, do you remember, was it cold? Could they control the temperature?
It was cold and it was hot. It was never just right, except in the fall and a little bit in the spring. In the spring, we would have rain, and they would put sheep manure on the campus to get the grass to grow. And it would rain, and for almost a week and a half, it was almost unbearable around here. The smell was just awful, but the grass was gorgeous when it came up.
So when you smell that smell, you just...
The grass is coming.
Where did you live when you were going to school?
Here.
On campus?
I lived in Murray Hall my first year, on the 3rd floor, the southeast corner. I'll never forget it because he had two windows, one on the south and one on the east. And then the next 3 years I lived in the Pi Phi house, which at that time was located across from Theta Pond, and I think it's the Lambakai house now, maybe. That's who we sold it to. And I lived there for 3 years.
When you were in the dorm, did you guys eat dinner together? Did you have social events in the hall?
They did. We had dinner from like 5 to 7 at night. I missed my mother's cooking. I remember that. And I remember my dad calling me and saying, "What are all these checks that you've written to the frat shop?" And I said, "They make the best cheeseburgers anywhere." Well, what I was doing was eating at the dorm and then going and getting a cheeseburger at the frat shop every night. And the frat shop was located across the street from, do you know where the Chi Mega house is now? It was catty-cornered across from the Chi Mega house then. Little bitty old house with a front porch on it and like 3 booths inside and the best cheeseburgers you've ever eaten. The food was not the best at the dormitory, as I remember. I remember you would have like ham on Sunday and peas and something else, and then on Monday you had ham loaf with peas in it, left over from Sunday. It was not the best.
Did you enjoy your time living in the dorm?
Yeah, it was fun, and I met a lot of people that are still friends of mine that, you know, we lived together in the dorm.
Tell me about laundry. How did you do your laundry?
In what?
How did you do your laundry?
I sent it home. At that time there was something called Mistletoe Express, and it was a trucking thing that every day went to all throughout Oklahoma. And I had a box that had a belt around it. I remember that, and you put your dirty laundry in there, and I just addressed it to home and called Mistletoe Express, and they'd come by and pick it up, and my mother would get it that night and wash it and fix it and send it back to me, because we had, now this is peculiar, but in the Pi Phi house we had a washing machine, we had no dryer and no clothesline. So it didn't do you much good.
Did your mother ever put anything extra in your laundry to send back to you?
My mother sent me like a cake every week, and the Mistletoe Express man would come wagging that cake up, holding it by the strings, you know, where it was, she wrapped the strings around it, and she could, it was wonderful. The Mistletoe Express was one of the best things going in Oklahoma at that time.
Now, you moved from Murray Hall into the sorority house. Tell me about your sorority.
Well, I loved it. It was fun. It was nice having all those people there. We lived in that house, and it had an attic to it, I remember, which was condemned by the fire department. The attic was condemned by the fire department. But that didn't keep us from living in it. We just had a good fire drill and knew how to get out of it. And I don't want that used in this thing.
Okay.
Okay. I made a lot of good friends, and I think it's a good life, because it was particularly for me because I was very busy. And between going to class and working on the old collie and doing the things I was doing, I didn't have time to do a lot, you know, a lot of extra running around with the girls and so forth. So I saw them at the house, you know, that's where I got to hobnob with them, mainly.
Did you have a house mother?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about her.
Well, she was very strict, and she was okay. She wasn't my mother. I mean, she wasn't like my mother, but she had all those girls to contend with, and she did a good job of doing that. I remember, though, when I became associate editor of the newspaper, I would get home like at 1 o'clock or 1:30 in the morning sometimes, and she didn't like that, and we had to get special permission for that to happen. Now, we got that from Dean Patchen. She was the Dean of Women. Dean Patchen grew up a block from me in Hobart, Oklahoma. She was older than, considerably older than I was. But she grew up in Hobart, Oklahoma too. So when I said, Dean Patchen, I'm working at the O'Colly, I need, don't get home. She trusted me. She believed me. Another kind of funny thing, the O'Colly office was, at that time, was in this ramshackle old building. It was old then. And it was kind of, where the north entrance is to the student union. The north, if you came out the north way, it was right there, kind of on that little hill.
Was that the publications building?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Publications building. I think that's what they called it. And at that time, the Sigma Chi fraternity had a Great Dane dog named Sig. And I had seen Sig a couple of times, but I didn't know this dog very well, and he was a huge dog. But when I started working late at night, that dog would be at the door and walk me home at night. Now this is the gospel truth. I think it was an angel, because I would have to walk through the dark part of Theta Pond through there, cut through there. Mm-hmm. And that dog would walk me home. I never was afraid.
Did you feel safe on campus back then?
Oh yeah. We had one incident, and somebody may have told you about this. We had an alligator that lived in Theta Pond. Have they told you about the alligator?
No, this is our first alligator story.
I can't remember that alligator's name. I cannot remember that alligator's name, but periodically, some boys would drag that alligator out of that pond. Now that alligator was about that long, I guess. Fairly good sized alligator. And they'd drag it out, and do something with it and throw it back in the pond. Well, one night, when we played the University of Arkansas, they always landed on the campus. Arkansas just landed in droves on our campus when we played Arkansas. And if they were Pi Phis, they just showed up at your house and stayed there. If they were independents, they just stayed at the dorm, doesn't matter. So they were staying at our house, and I'd given up my bed to somebody, and I was sleeping on the couch in the basement. Our basement at the house then it was in a sunken backyard, and part of the basement looked out onto this backyard with windows. So it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, I heard this thud, and I woke up, and it was coming from upstairs. And I went upstairs, and there was this alligator tied to this table in what we call the sunroom. It was a little room off the living room. He was just lashing that furniture right and left. So I got the president and brought her down there, and we decided that the thing to do was to call the police and take it to the Theta house and have them take it to the Theta house, which is another sorority, on campus. And so we called them, and they took it down to the Theta house, and then we told everybody at our house not to say one word about it, and we'd find out. Whoever did it couldn't stand if they'd have to find out about it. Well, finally, that spring, I was in a wedding, and one of the groomsmen was sitting next to me at the dinner, and he said, I can't stand it. How did that alligator get down to the Theta house? And so I found out from him who had done it, and it was a bunch of betas and Sigma Chi's and Sigma Nus who'd all gotten together and gotten the alligator out and taken it, and they crawled in the windows. We were all asleep down there and gone in between us to take the alligator upstairs. But that poor old alligator, it spent more time out of that drink, with somebody wrestling it around doing something with it, and I don't know how it ever got there, but it lived there for about 10 years, I think.
People weren't afraid of being thrown in Theta Pond with an alligator?
Yeah, well, a little bit.
From the house, you were able to see a lot of activity at Theta Pond.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any, outside of the alligator stories, any crazy happenings?
Well, the old club, which was the athletic club, they used to have an initiation. And they would streak down what was then called College Avenue, University Avenue. And we were up in the 4th floor looking out the windows and saw all this one night, all the streaking down the street. They didn't know it because they would have been mortified, you know. In those days, they would have been mortified. Today, they probably would have showed off more.
How many of your sorority sisters lived in the house?
All of them except the ones that were married.
Approximately?
There were probably, in those days, there were probably 75 of us that lived in the house. In those days, a lot of women came to school to get married. I remember in my pledge class there were 35 girls. There were 5 of us that graduated. The rest of them got married. One of those girls that graduated with us, her parents were up here, and she lived next door to me in the house, so I overheard this. Her dad was saying, "We sent you up here to get married, and you haven't found a husband yet, and you're about to graduate." So a lot of parents sent their kids up here to get married, sent the girls up here to find a husband. And in those days, you know, there was the School of Home Economics, and that occupied most girls. You could be a teacher, education. You could be a secretary. You could be a nurse, or you could major in home economics. And outside of that, it was very rare for women to do anything other than those things.
What motivated you? What was your whole purpose for going to college? What did you want to do?
I'd always wanted to go to college. College just sounded like that dream thing, you know, that's off there that you always want to do. I'd always wanted to work on a newspaper. I'd always thought that would be. I like to write, for one thing, and I was good at writing in grade school and, you know, in junior high. And I thought, well, that's what I want to do. So that's what I did.
Tell me about being involved with the Student Senate.
With the Student Senate?
How did that come about?
Well, I ran for the Student Senate and won. And I was from the School of Arts and Sciences. Journalism was in the School of Arts and Sciences. So that was the one I represented. And it was very interesting. I love being on the Student Senate because I like things like that, you know.
Now, it is homecoming weekend here. It's 2007. Tomorrow we're having the big parade, and you had a role in the parade when you were in school.
Well, we had to, if you were on the Senate, you had to be responsible for something during the year, and my job was the homecoming parade. And I remember I was up all night long. I remember that, being up all night long, putting the floats in position. And the floats were so ornate. And I haven't seen a homecoming. I'm going to get to see it tomorrow for the first time in a long time. And I don't know how ornate they are now, but they were something else, like a showboat on the Mississippi, and, you know, different floats like that.
So it was very elaborate.
Very elaborate, very elaborate. And I think at one time, wasn't our homecoming parade voted the top parade in the nation or something like that?
I'm not sure. I know homecoming is just one of the largest in the nation here. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like, helping put all the pieces together? Was it stressful? Was it easy to work with everybody? During the parade, were you keeping things moving?
Well, during the parade, we just kept them in order, just to make sure they were number one, number two, everything was in order. The stressful thing was getting everybody there on time and getting it lined up. You don't want to start a parade late. You lose your people. So, but the stressfulness was staying up all night. That was the main thing. All I remember is going home and crashing. Everybody was going to the game, and I just went home and crashed. I just remember that.
What was the parade route?
Well, it was to downtown Stillwater. And I can't remember where we started. It's so different now. This town is built up so much that we built float. I remember that the Pi Phis built their float at one of the garages downtown, one of the car garages in the back. And I remember it was freezing cold, and we were back there punching the paper in the chicken wire. And it seems as if the parade route started east of there a little bit, as it kind of dips down by the railroad tracks, down in there somewhere, but I can't remember the exact route.
Did they end up making a loop at the stadium?
They took the winners out of the stadium. They didn't make a loop. Only the winning floats went to the stadium.
Okay. And how many winning floats did they pick?
Oh gosh, Juliana, I don't know.
Were there different categories you could win?
Yeah, there were different categories, but I can't remember what the categories were.
Okay. What else do you remember about homecoming? Were house decorations big?
In those days, you either did house decorations or you did parade.
Okay.
You didn't do both at the same time. You did one or the other, and you combined. I think they still do that. The houses or the dorms worked with other girls, worked with boys. Like a girls' dorm would work with a boys' dorm, and a sorority would work with a fraternity.
They teamed up.
But it was very colorful, and the stadium, the football stadium, we nearly froze to death. In those days, women didn't wear jeans like they do now. We went to a football game in high heels. And the only thing that saved us in those days was that our skirts were long, so that the wind couldn't really freeze us to death. But it was the wind would whip in under the steps on the north part of the stadium, and it was cold. Oh, it was cold.
Did you dress up to go to class?
Dress up to go where?
To class. Did you wear?
We wore skirts and sweaters and loafers and socks, and the rule was the socks were 6 inches from the hem of your skirt. So that made them what? About like that. From the top of your socks to the hem of your skirt. And you wore little scarves around your neck.
Did you attend many sporting events?
Basketball. Basketball was the big thing. We had a great basketball team. That was Mr. Iba's team. A friend of mine in Wichita Falls was a player on his team. And I don't know, have you interviewed Harold Rogers?
No.
He would be a good one. Harold is a lawyer in Wichita Falls, and he was on the first string of Henry Iba's team for about 3 years in the 50s. And he is, I'm just telling you this. I know you probably don't know who Billy Saul Estes was, do you?
No.
He was a Texas man who built millions of dollars from the federal government, and nobody could pin him down and get him sent to jail, and Harold was the attorney that got him sent to jail. So he's a very well-known attorney, a very capable attorney, but he remembers everything about those years and about Henry Iba and about the team. And he still picks up people that were on his team, flies around and picks them up on game day and brings them up here to the basketball games.
Huh.
And he's
interesting.
He was very good.
When you were at the games,
Mm-hmm.
What was the atmosphere like? What was the attendance like?
It was always full. We had tickets in our packet at the beginning of the season, but it was for every other game. So if you wanted to go to every game, you spent half your time trying to trade around and get people who weren't going and get their tickets to go. Basketball was a different game then. It wasn't this. It was Mr. Iba perfected the stall. Do you know what the stall is? Okay, it means get that ball and hold it. And maybe I'll pass it to you, but you pass it right back to me. We're not gonna shoot it until like 10 seconds before the game's over. And stall it for 5 minutes. I mean, they would stand out there and stall that ball. And I've seen Harold stand there and not shoot that ball until it was like 6 seconds before the end of the game, shoot it and hit the basket and win the game. So it was exciting, and it was always good with Mr. Iba here.
I know your time was very chewed up with the OCOLI and your other activities. Did you ever have any downtime? And if you did, what did you do for fun with your friends?
Well, I dated, and we went to lots of parties, and every night at 7, every night we could make it, on the 4th floor of the Student Union, they had a big jukebox. And we danced. We danced to that wonderful 40s music. And it was fun. It was we jitterbugged, and we danced.
What were some of the musical groups of the time?
Well, the big band era. It was a big band, and they came here. There was Ray Anthony, and then we had this thing called the Allied Artists Series, and we would bring people in here, like Duke Ellington came. I remember when Duke Ellington came. He was so great, and then some of the fraternities would get, I don't know where they got all the money, but one fraternity brought in Ray Anthony, and he was a big name then, and just those big bands, and they were just wonderful, and dances were a big thing then.
Were there, on any given night, multiple dances going on?
Oh yeah. Sometimes the ballroom at the Student Union would have a dance going on, and somebody else would, and then they had lots of theme dances, like the Sigma News had a big Western dance, and somebody else would have some other kind of dance. And when they had their Western dance, they had Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. Well, you've never heard of them, but that was a big Western band then, So they'd have big name bands come in here for those things.
Did your sorority host dances?
We hosted parties. We didn't host dances. The fraternities did hosted most of the dances.
Tell me about a typical date. What would you go and do?
Well, there were no cars. And if I defy you to look in those annuals and find a fat person. We walked. We walked everywhere. We walked to class. We walked downtown to the show. We walked to the corner down here. I don't know where the movie is still there by the fire station. Is there still a movie on the corner?
No.
Okay. There used to be a movie to the southwest of the fire station. We walked everywhere in the dead of winter. Sometimes if you had a date that had some money, you could take a cab downtown. But we'd walk most of the time, and lots of times we'd walk over here and play bridge, or we'd go to a fraternity house and play bridge, or we did a lot of that. And the fraternities' houses, most of them all had that new invention called television. And I hated it because you turned it on, it was snowy, and everybody sat there and looked at it, and you couldn't see anything, and I thought, I don't know if this is ever going to work out or not. And then the man I married was in television. So anyhow.
Where did you learn how to play bridge?
Here, at school. I learned at the Pi Phi house and at some of the fraternity houses. I mean, we were all playing bridge. We all learned how to play bridge. And it was fun. I mean, in those days we had lots of fun.
Outside of the student union, what were some of the other popular places on campus or off campus to hang out at?
Well, of course, there was a frat shop that had the greatest cheeseburgers in the world. And then I just drove down and come in here. It doesn't look the same at all. What is this street that the AJR house is on? And right here. Right there, that street.
I'm not sure.
What is that street? The one that comes up to the Union.
Okay.
From the south.
I'm not sure, but we will put it in the transcript
when
we're having this conversation.
Okay, there was a hangout there, and I can't think of the name of that place. In the middle of the block. I can't think of the name of it. And then there was a drugstore across the street. There were some dry cleaners there, but it was really a quiet street. Now, it's not quiet. There's not quiet on this street. So, but those, and then down by the fire station where that movie was, next door to it was a big drugstore. and we really hung out a lot on the campus. The Union was a big hangout place. The Union wasn't open my freshman year. I think it opened toward the end of my freshman year, and it was a very popular place. One time I remember the Allied artists had Charles Boyer and Charles Lawton and his wife Elsa Lancaster. Well, you don't know any of those people, do you? No. They were very famous movie stars, very famous actors and actresses, and they were here to do whatever they did, and I've forgotten what it was. But we had this horrible snowstorm, and they were snowed in and couldn't get out. So they were in the Union coffee shop one morning with all the kids hanging around talking to them, which was, I thought, really pretty neat. You know, just a kind of a hands-on interview with the stars. So it seemed like there was something all the time. We went to Lake Carl Blackwell a lot, too. We had fun. Wiener roasts and things like that out there. Good, clean, fun type things.
Tell me about telephones. Were there a lot of telephones on campus? In the dorm, in the sorority house?
In the sorority house, you had a couple on each floor. And in the dorms, you had little pockets where they'd have 2 or 3 phones, and you were always standing in line to use the phone. That was, you were always standing in line, unless you were going to call real early in the morning, Or one of the things that took place during this time was Joseph McCarthy. Now, do you know who the Joe McCarthy era is? Okay. And if you were working for a state or a city or anything, you had to sign a loyalty oath. Well, I was working for the old college. So my dad called me at 6 o'clock one morning and said, you get over there and you sign that loyalty oath and don't you give them any guff. Well, the loyalty oath said, I will take up arms for my country. That's what it said. Well, it didn't bother me, but Joe McCarthy bothered me a lot. And that's what he was afraid I'd decide to rebel and not sign it, But I signed it, so. But that was one of the news things that happened during the time.
Were they making everybody who worked in student publications sign this loyalty oath?
Yeah, because we were paid by, this was a state-supported school, or a federally supported land-grant school.
Did you guys cover it in the paper?
Sure, I think so.
Did any students kind of feel uneasy signing it or refuse to sign it?
Well, and most of them, journalism students are rebellious people anyway. They always have been, even though back in those days journalism was a totally different thing than it is now. The Watergate thing changed journalism, changed the face of journalism forever, I think. But still, we felt like we knew more than just about anybody, and we would sit down and say, well, we don't like this, but we went along with it, So one of the things that happened on the Student Senate, I think I told you this on the phone, was our Student Senate made the motion that the next year's Senate work with the Board of Regents to change the name of this college from A&M to Oklahoma State University. And to my knowledge, that's the first move made to change the name of the school. And it was changed about, 3 years later, 2 years later?
And how did you feel about the name changing?
I loved it. I wanted it desperately. It needed to be changed.
Why?
Because we had suffered through all those Aggie jokes. And it was like we were nothing but agriculture and mechanics. And that wasn't it at all. There were lots of other things going on at this school besides that.
Did you ever have classes in Old Central?
I had one my freshman year. It was an English class. And it was in the basement. And I felt like the thing was going to fall down on me because literally the ceiling was falling down, and every once in a while a chunk would fall down. You've got to remember that housing was not only housing, but classrooms were at such a premium in those days. And there were so many classes. There were so many kids on campus.
Did you go home often when you were in school?
Never. There were no cars. I had a friend from Altus who had a car, and he would go home at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and that's when I went home.
And did your parents ever visit?
Every once in a while. My dad was a manager of a co-op, and he had quite a few things agriculturally related up here, and he was a good friend of Dr. Wilhelm, who was the president of the university at one time. They were on the National Wheat Board together, so he would come through here every once in a while.
Is there a place on campus that is special to you?
The whole campus is. If you ask me if there's something I'd like to see on this campus, I'd like to see some signage on that highway out there that is more than just Oklahoma State University to the right. I'd like to see something that is neat and good looking out there. And there's no reason it's not out there. It just hadn't been done yet.
It's the journalism in you.
I guess it is. I don't know.
Is there a faculty member that played a big role in your life here on campus?
No, I had a political science teacher named Dr. Donnell, Donnell. He was a wonderful teacher, and I loved him, and I loved his classes. In journalism, I have to say Professor Stratton was an excellent teacher. He was the one who made us take all those hours. But when I was working on the old collie, when we do the layout, we'd come in the next day thinking, oh, where's he going to red mark today? Well, we did one layout, I remember this, because we thought that layout is perfect. There's nothing he can say about that layout. And the next day we came in, and it was on the bulletin board, and it was red marked up, and so we decided there was no way we were ever really going to please him completely, but he was an excellent teacher. And journalism and political science were my two things I loved. So I would say they were the two that, I remember the most.
Is there just one key memory that you would put above all others working in the Ocali? That's just, when you think of the Ocali, that's the memory that comes to mind?
Well, there were two or three things. There was a guy that worked on the Ocali that started school with me, Bill Connors. He was a sports editor. Bill became eventually the sports editor for the Tulsa World and Tribune. And he died about 3 years ago, and he was taken into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame about 2 years before he died. He was such an excellent sports writer, and one that all the sports people admired so much, thought so much of, all the athletes. How they get mad at sports writers, and they have a right to get mad at them. The incident that happened with our coach, that would never have happened with Bill Connors. He would never have done that. Never. Because all of his stories were attributed, they were attributed, they had 2 or 3 people saying, yes, that's right, this is what somebody said. That would never have happened if Bill had done it. Then we had another guy there. His name was Arnold Young, and I don't know whether he's still alive or not, but he had a good friend. He was from Commerce, Oklahoma, and he had a good friend, and brought him up there once and introduced him to us. It was Mickey Mantle, and I remember that. I remember the floor in that old Collie office. It was oiled and old, and I don't know why the thing hadn't burned down. I don't know why that building stood up. It was freezing cold in the wintertime. I don't know what kept us all from getting pneumonia.
Did you work on it all 4 years?
After they finally let me work my freshman year.
After you graduated from OAMC, what did you end up doing?
Well, I wanted to go to work on the Daily Oklahoman, and I'd had a column every week in the Daily Oklahoman about Oklahoma City people about, well, just happenings on the A&M campus. And so I applied to the Daily Oklahoman. And what they offered me was, in spite of working for them for 2 years with this column, I could go to work writing obituaries at a salary that wouldn't even pay my rent. Now that was because I was a woman.
And what year, approximately?
54, 53.
Okay.
And I'll have to tell you what, my advertising final the year before, I had decided to do it on American Airlines. And at that time, their home office was in Tulsa. So I went to American and got all this information and said, I'm going to do my report, my final exam on American Airlines. So I made this huge map, and I had all the routes strung out and everything, you know, and made an A on it. It was, you know, I really put the time in it and everything. And so American was coming here to interview on campus, so I took my thing, my report, and I went over to American Airlines. And I said, okay, here's what I did. By this time I knew everybody there. Here's what I did, and I made an A on it. What do you think about it? Oh, they liked it. You know, they wanted it. And I said, okay, will you give me a job in your advertising department at American Airlines? They said, we don't hire women in our advertising department, but you can have a job as a hostess. And I said, no, I'll take my project and leave. I went to work finally at a radio station. That was a country western radio station in Oklahoma City, writing copy. But at least it paid me enough to pay the rent. But this is one of the things that was terribly unfair. And at those times, in those days, you've got to remember, very few people majored in anything except home economics.
Mm-hmm.
Women weren't allowed to do very much. And that still makes me mad to this day. And then the salaries were so much lower for women. And they're still not up there with men.
Okay.
The job I had in Texas, with the person who took my place was a man, and he made nearly $10,000 more a year than I did because I was a woman. That's not fair. That's not right. We've come a long way.
Definitely. We still have quite a few to go, but
But we've come a long way.
definitely. Did you meet your husband here at?
No, I met him at the radio station where I was working. He was working at the TV station in conjunction.
And have any of your children attended Oklahoma State?
Yes, my daughter went to Oklahoma State.
Okay.
And she's married and lives out in the Panhandle on a ranch now. And her degree was in pre-law. And what she does is kind of what I do. Which, I mean, she works on projects and does like advertising type, you know, programs and things like that, projects. And my son went to Texas Tech and then to Texas Tech Medical School, and he's a doctor and lives in Loveland, Colorado.
Okay. Do you have any grandkids who go to school here?
I have 4 grandsons.
Wow. And are they in school yet? Or
No.
No?
Well, they're in grade school. They're not.
Oh, so you have plenty of time to lead them in the right path.
Well, they're already in the right path.
Of course, of course. What is it about Oklahoma State that sparks such loyalty in students and alumni?
I don't know. It's that indefinable spirit of allegiance that it becomes yours. You belong to it, and it belongs to you. You know, and it will never desert you. It's there. I don't know how to describe it.
But it means a lot to you.
Oh, yes. Where'd you go to school?
Florida State.
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Does it mean a lot to you?
It does.
Does it? Okay.
It does.
Why?
I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. I debated going home. I went to school 8 hours away. And then it just clicked. I found the right niche. I was actually working for the campus radio station, and I found people who pretty much showed me that, you can make this work and you can do this. I met my husband there. I cannot stand the Florida Gators, so that's,
See?
It's
like I can't stand OU. So.
I don't know if it's the same about how alumni feel though about OSU. I think people, they just feel so strong and special.
You've asked that question to somebody else. I know you have. I can tell by the question. So what have they said?
They feel that they just feel without Oklahoma State, they wouldn't be the people who they are today. That they wouldn't have gone on to do what they've done. They wouldn't have had their children come to school here and their children's children. And it just means so much. It showed them,
It does mean a lot.
It does. I mean, and I just think it's something. What advice would you give to students today?
Well, to girls, to women, my advice is to get that degree. Whatever it is in, you need to get a degree. Because you may have to take care of yourself, and you need that degree. To students, I just think it's important that they all, and if they're going to Oklahoma State, they need to get the best education they can get, but they need to realize that this may be 4 of the best years of their life, and they need to appreciate them.
Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't spoken about today, that I haven't asked you? Any memories you'd like to share?
I think I've just about said everything I can think of. I could talk about it forever, One thing sparks another, but it's a wonderful school, and I was looking at it today. It's so well kept. Most of the lawns are mowed, and it looks so nice, and well kept, and that's good. The grounds have always been one of the strong suit for this college, the way the grounds look, and they still look good. And the college itself is just beautiful, really pretty. But it's fun up here. And when my daughter was trying to decide where she wanted to go to school, we lived in Texas, and she'd been to Texas Tech and to TCU and to SMU and to University of Texas. And so I brought her up here and just let her out and said, I'll pick you up in 3 hours at such and such a place. So she found the student something or other, and somebody took her on a tour. And by the time I got back, she had gotten all the pre-enrollment forms and was ready to enroll. She was ready to come up here. And there are quite a few people coming from Texas now who are coming up here. So I think it's becoming pretty well known.
Definitely. Definitely.
Have I answered everything you need?
You have.
Have I given you anything?
Definitely. Well, first, let me thank you for being here and sharing your memories with us today. We do appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.